Hands where I can see them. Now! Officer Ryan Holt's voice cracked through the mist like a whip. The red-blue lights carved through the drizzle, reflecting off the wet asphalt of Winding Creek Lane. Deputy Chief Marcus Langston froze mid-step, his hand still gripping the recycling bin, for a second. The morning was silent except for the low hum of the patrol SUV. Then Holt stepped closer, his boots splashing into a puddle, his hand resting on the holster of his taser. The air smelled faintly of rain and gasoline. ID. Now. He barked. Langston turned slowly, confusion in his eyes. Officer, you're on private property. What's the reason for this stop? Holt's jaw tightened. Because I said so. The words landed heavy, unprofessional, and dangerous. That single sentence would later be played in federal court, frame by frame, as evidence of a man's rage and a system's failure. Before we go into this story, where are you watching from? Take a moment. Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe to the channel and give me a like. It helps more people hear the truth about justice, power, and what can happen in less than a minute. The drizzle hadn't stopped since dawn, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the soft whir of a delivery drone overhead. Dunwoody Heights was the kind of place where lawns looked manicured by geometry itself, and where silence had a price. Marcus Langston, 38 years old, Deputy Chief of the Civil Rights Division, wasn't supposed to stand out on his days off. He blended in, gray hoodie, joggers, running shoes. But that morning, something about him, maybe the calm confidence or the small black pouch tucked under his arm, caught Holt's eye. The rookie cop didn't see a federal prosecutor. He saw a target. Langston had been up since 5, reviewing sealed evidence. 42 pages of bank records and wire transfers connecting Lieutenant Vincent Parrish to a laundering ring. It was one of the biggest civil rights corruption cases in Georgia history. And the folder in his hoodie pocket contained everything needed to bring Parrish down. The only thing standing between justice and exposure was the fragile chain of custody. Langston was supposed to meet an FBI contact at 7:15, instead, at 6:58. He was facing down a jittery cop in the rain. Ryan Holt was 26, a year out of the academy, 15 months on the force, Marine veteran, decorated for bravery, haunted by war. He'd been up all night, living on caffeine and ego, listening to a podcast about alpha control. His cruiser had been idling near the roundabout when he saw Langston's silhouette through the fog. Black male, gray hoodie, early morning, suspicious behavior, he told himself. His hand reached for the siren before his brain caught up. The red-blue light flashed, and his pulse quickened. This was his chance to prove himself. To someone. To anyone. Langston. Meanwhile, had that quiet awareness only federal prosecutors develop over years of surviving courtrooms and close calls. He knew the type. Young, angry, trying too hard to feel in command. His instincts told him to stay calm. Officer. This is a misunderstanding, he said, reaching into his pocket. Slow and deliberate. I work with the Department of Justice. He showed the badge. A silver shield with U.S. Attorney's Office etched across the top. Holt didn't blink. Fake badges don't impress me, he muttered. Then, lowering his voice, he pressed the side button on his body cam. Turning it off. Step back, Langston warned. That's a violation of... But he didn't finish. Holt had already picked up his phone, whispering into it. Vincent, it's me. I think I got someone from DOJ snooping around. Yeah, same area. I'll stall him. Langston's stomach tightened. He knew that name. Parrish. His target. The man whose entire empire of stolen cash and seized assets was about to crumble. It all connected in a flash. Holt wasn't just nervous. He was complicit. That's when Langston tapped his Apple Watch, the one his wife had gifted him after his promotion. Recording on, "You're making a mistake. Officer Holt," he said evenly. You're interfering with a federal investigation. Holt's pupils narrowed. You think a title makes you untouchable? He took a step closer. I've seen men like you hide behind power. Not today. From above, the Amazon delivery drone hovered, its camera focusing instinctively on movement. The system had no bias, no fear, no hesitation. It simply recorded what the human eye might soon deny. The lens caught every second, the slow escalation, the tension in Holt's jaw, the rain darkening Langston's gray hoodie, the glint of the DOJ badge half buried in water. Each second stacked like evidence waiting to be revealed. Holt's voice grew harder. On your knees, hands behind your head. Langston straightened his back. You don't want to do this, he said softly, but the rookie didn't hear him. The rain was louder now, drumming on the cruiser, and something inside Holt snapped. The Marine reflex took over. He grabbed Langston's arm, twisted, and pushed him face down onto the pavement. The coffee cup Langston had been holding spilled, brown streaks running down the driveway. His breath hit the cold ground. You're resisting, Holt shouted, though Langston hadn't moved. Officer, I'm not resisting, came the reply, muffled but clear. You're being recorded. And indeed, he was. The drone zoomed closer. The microphone on Langston's watch caught every grunt, every curse, every metallic click of the taser being drawn. 42 pages of sealed evidence scattered into the rain, some sliding toward the gutter, others sticking to the asphalt. The folder burst open like a secret unwilling to stay hidden. Stay down, Holt yelled, pressing his knee between Langston's shoulders. You have no idea who you're messing with, he spat. The irony hung heavy in the air. Langston, calm even under weight and water, replied. Neither do you. At that exact moment, a neighbor's window opened. Eleanor Grant, a retired judge with sharp eyes and a steadier hand than most reporters, lifted her iPhone. She didn't know who the man on the ground was, but she knew injustice when she saw it. She hit record, in the fog of adrenaline. Holt didn't notice the second cruiser pulling in. Officer Jenna Brooks stepped out, her voice cutting through the storm. Ryan, what the hell are you doing? Holt looked up, breathing hard. He's resisting. That's Deputy Chief Langston, she screamed, for a heartbeat. Everything stopped. The siren echo, the drone hum. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Holt's hand went limp. The taser slipped, clattering onto the pavement. Langston turned his head just enough to meet his eyes. 47 seconds. He whispered. That's all it took. Later, investigators would timestamp it. 6:58:13 to 6:59 KO. 47 seconds, less than a minute. Yet enough to trigger a storm that would rewrite laws, destroy careers, and expose a network of corruption stretching from a suburban cul-de-sac to the highest offices of law enforcement. For now, though, all that existed was the soft hiss of rain, the blinking red light of a drone in the sky, and a single man breathing through pain and restraint, unaware that history had just begun counting. Ryan Holt sat alone in his squad car, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee and damp leather. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. The image of Marcus Langston's calm face replayed in his head like a taunt. He told himself it was adrenaline, not guilt, but guilt had its own heartbeat, steady, relentless, and hard to silence. He turned up the radio. A podcast host was shouting about power, control, and reclaiming manhood. Holt nodded absently, needing something to drown out the whisper that he had crossed a line. Marcus Langston, meanwhile, sat on the porch of his home 3 blocks away, a blanket around his shoulders and a bandage on his wrist. The city had already begun spinning. Phone calls from Washington, agents in unmarked cars, the quiet chaos that follows public disgrace. But Langston wasn't thinking about the headlines. He was thinking about scars, his and Holt's. He had 2 of them, one across his forearm from a broken window when he was 16, and another, invisible one, from the night his father never came home. The police had called it a misunderstanding. It was the kind of word men like Marcus learned to live with. And later, to fight against. Holt's scar ran deeper. He had earned his first in Helmand Province, shrapnel along the ribs, the kind that aches when the weather turns. He'd left Afghanistan thinking he'd find peace in routine, patrols, radio calls, simple order. But the war had followed him home. Every dark alley looked like a hostile village. Every shout sounded like an ambush. When he'd joined Dunwoody PD, his file already carried 4 warnings: excessive tone, volatile behavior, uncontrolled physical response. None of it mattered. They were short on recruits. He wore his badge like a bandage over a wound he refused to treat. Marcus had seen that kind of wound before. Not on the battlefield, but in courtrooms. Men who couldn't tell fear from authority, or guilt from duty. He knew Holt's aggression wasn't random. It was trained, rewarded, and ignored until it turned deadly. Still, that didn't excuse it. His own father's last words had been about fairness, about keeping calm when others lose control. That morning, under Holt's knee, Marcus had done exactly that. He stayed still. He let the evidence speak, and now that it was over, his calm scared people more than his anger ever could. At headquarters, Holt sat across from his sergeant. The body cam footage had been requested, but all they had was static after the first 10 seconds. Holt blamed technical failure. His sergeant didn't believe him, but paperwork was easier than confrontation. "You'll be on desk duty until we clear this up," she said, sliding the form across the table. Holt signed without reading. He didn't see the small note attached. A request from Internal Affairs for a full behavioral review. Driving home. Holt replayed the encounter again. The man's voice. That badge. The quiet certainty. Who talks like that to a cop? Then he remembered the name the woman had shouted. Deputy Chief Langston. The color drained from his face. He'd attacked a federal officer. God, he muttered, gripping the wheel. He tried to justify it to himself. The hoodie, the attitude, the situation. But even in his mind, it sounded hollow. He slammed the dashboard. "He provoked me," he said out loud, as if someone was listening. Marcus sat with his wife, Layla. That evening, she was a trauma surgeon, calm, precise, but her hands trembled as she poured tea. "You could have been killed," she said softly. "They don't care about titles in that moment." He nodded. "I know. Their daughter, Justice, was upstairs, building something with Legos. He could hear her humming through the ceiling." "She doesn't know," Layla whispered. "Not yet." Marcus looked at the window, at the soft rain still falling. "She will," he said. "But when she does, it'll be the truth, not what they put on the news." For Holt, the night brought no peace. He drank until the podcast host's voices blurred together. Every word was a mirror reflecting his own insecurity. Take control. Never show weakness. He stared at his reflection in the darkened TV screen. A man in uniform, but lost. He picked up his phone again and scrolled to a saved number. Lit Vincent Parrish. The man he owed everything to. The man who'd covered for him after the last complaint. "You said you'd handle it," Holt said when Parrish answered. "You said if something went wrong." Parrish cut him off. "You did fine. Just keep quiet. Internal Affairs can't touch me." Then, softer, more dangerous. "Remember who signs your overtime slips?" Marcus, in contrast, was already writing his report. He typed slowly, each sentence measured like a testimony before Congress. He attached the files from his Apple Watch and forwarded them to the FBI field office. He knew what would happen next. The calls, the pressure to settle quietly, the veiled threats about optics. But he also knew that silence was the oldest trick in the book. His father had stayed silent once, and it had cost him his life. Marcus wouldn't repeat that mistake. At 11:47 p.m., an encrypted email arrived from an unknown sender. "They're watching you. Check your trash can camera." Marcus frowned. He logged into the home system, pulled the feed from his driveway. There, in the shadows beyond the mailbox, a car idled, license plate, D4782, registered to Dunwoody Police Department. He hit record again, saving a copy to his external drive. The storm wasn't over. It was just gathering across town. Holt sat on his porch steps, a cigarette burning between his fingers despite the drizzle. His neighbor, old Mr. Griffin, shuffled by with his dog. "You look like hell." "Son," he said kindly. Holt gave a faint smile. "Yeah, long day." Griffin paused. "You know, my brother was a cop too. Vietnam messed him up bad. He thought everyone was the enemy. Took him years to see he was fighting ghosts." Holt didn't reply. He stared at the smoke twisting into the night. Ghosts. Maybe that was it. Maybe Marcus Langston wasn't his enemy. Maybe he was just the mirror he didn't want to face. By morning, both men were awake before dawn. Marcus brewed coffee and reviewed evidence. Holt drove aimlessly through empty streets, trying to feel in control of something. Their lives had collided like weather fronts. One cold, rational, steady, the other volatile, charged, desperate. The pressure between them would break soon. And when it did, it wouldn't just be another bad headline. It would be a storm, one measured not in hours, but in 47 seconds that neither man could take back. Marcus looked at the photo on his desk, his father in uniform, smiling on a day that once promised more than it delivered. "We're almost there, Dad," he whispered, and somewhere across town. Ryan Holt whispered to himself too, his words barely audible over the sound of rain. It was just 47 seconds, that's all. But even he knew. Sometimes 47 seconds can last forever. The morning after the confrontation began like any other gray dawn in Dunwoody Heights. Quiet lawns, newspaper trucks, and the faint hum of sprinklers. But by 7:02 a.m., the calm shattered. Officer Ryan Holt sat in his cruiser at the end of the cul-de-sac, his mind still spinning from the night before. He'd convinced himself it was justified. Officer safety, non-compliance, situational control, words that sounded clinical enough to hide the truth. But his hands still remembered the weight of Langston's body pressing against the wet pavement. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the line he'd crossed wasn't procedural. It was moral. Marcus Langston woke early too. His back ached from the fall, and the bruise across his shoulder had turned a dark purple. Still, he felt calm. He'd replayed every second of the stop in his mind. The drone hovering, the body cam click, the hiss of the taser, the shout from Jenna Brooks. It was all there, burned into his memory. He made coffee, slow and deliberate, and sat at his desk reviewing the footage already syncing from the drone's cloud server, every angle, every frame, every breath. 47 seconds. From the moment Holt ordered ID to the instant Brooks yelled stop, that was all it took. 47 seconds that would shake a department, a city, and a nation. At 9 a.m., the internal review meeting began. Holt sat across from Sergeant Victor Lang, shifting in his chair. The body cam showed 10 seconds of footage before going black. Lang's face was expressionless. "You shut this off yourself?" Holt shook his head. "Battery failure?" Lang raised an eyebrow. "During a federal stop? Convenient timing." Holt stayed quiet. He was good at silence. Soldiers learned that early. But silence couldn't erase what was already spreading online. Judge Eleanor Grant's iPhone video had leaked to a local journalist, and within 2 hours it was everywhere. Federal prosecutor forced to ground in suburban stop. The clip was short, 47 seconds. shaky, grainy, but undeniable. Rain, flashing lights, a man shouting, "You're on camera," and then the officer's knee pressing down. By noon, the Department of Justice called. Marcus was instructed to stay silent until the Bureau completed its investigation. He agreed, but deep down, he knew silence was no longer his choice. The story had gone viral. Reporters swarmed Dunwoody Heights. Activists demanded answers. Holt's name leaked through back channels, followed by screenshots of his old social media posts, jokes about alpha control, photos from Afghanistan captioned "Order through Dominance." His defenders called it stress. His critics called it hate. That afternoon, Marcus received an encrypted file from the FBI Tech Division, data extracted from his Apple Watch and the drone's black box. He listened closely. Holt's voice came through clear. "Yeah, Vincent, it's me. I got a DOJ guy here. I'll stall him." Then Parrish's reply, low and cold. "Do what you have to." Marcus paused the clip. It was enough. Enough to prove collusion. Enough to bring Parrish down. He sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly, for the first time since that morning. He allowed himself a small smile. "You made your mistake," he whispered, "and it's recorded." At that same hour, Holt sat in his apartment staring at his cracked phone screen. Messages from fellow officers blinked. "Hang in there. Brother, they'll bury this. Don't talk to IA. But the one from Parrish was different. Delete everything. Now." Holt hesitated, then opened his body cam folder. Nothing. Empty. He scrolled through his call log. Gone. He didn't realize that the camera hidden in his lapel, a small Insta360 test unit installed by a city tech pilot, had kept its own encrypted copy of the entire encounter, a hidden lens no one had told him about. By 3 p.m., the FBI arrived at his door. "Officer Holt, we need your full statement." He nodded numbly, the color draining from his face. "You're not under arrest," the agent said. "Yet." That word carried weight. He gave them everything, or at least what he thought they didn't already have. But when they asked about the phone call to Parrish, his jaw locked. Never happened. They let the lie hang there. "We have the audio," the agent replied softly, "from Mr. Langston's watch." Holt looked down at his hands. "Then I guess I'm done." Meanwhile, across town, Marcus stood in front of his living room window, his daughter tugging at his sleeve. "Daddy, why are the news people outside?" He crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, telling the truth makes people uncomfortable." Layla watched from the kitchen doorway, her eyes tired but proud. She had seen too many hospital beds, too many men who thought control was strength. Marcus wasn't one of them. "You did what you had to," she said quietly. "Now let the storm do its work." That evening, the FBI raided Lieutenant Parrish's office. They found 2 safes, one filled with cash, the other with flash drives labeled Asset Forfeiture Division. Each contained transaction records linking seized drug funds to offshore accounts. The trail was clear, and Holt's voice on the recording placed him as a cooperating accomplice, even if unknowingly. Parrish was arrested at 10:17 p.m., escorted past cameras in handcuffs, his face pale under the lights. The department issued a short statement. "We are cooperating fully." It meant nothing. The truth was out, back at the precinct. Holt sat in the locker room staring at his reflection. His badge lay on the bench beside him, cold and heavy. For a moment, he thought about the day he'd first pinned it on. The pride, the applause, the promise to protect. Then he thought about the 47 seconds that erased it all. He didn't remember the details clearly anymore. Just flashes, rain, anger. The sound of his own voice shouting commands that no longer made sense. The sound of a man staying calm when he couldn't. He rubbed his temples and whispered, "Why didn't I just walk away?" Marcus spent that night writing in his journal, something he hadn't done in years. He wrote about the calm before the storm, the way power distorts perception, the fragile line between authority and abuse. He ended with one sentence: "Justice begins when the camera doesn't blink." He closed the book, turned off the light, and tried to sleep. Outside, reporters were still parked along the curb, their headlights cutting through the mist. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Not loud, but steady, as if warning that the next phase was coming. The following morning, federal agents returned to Marcus's home. They thanked him for his cooperation and informed him that the footage from all three sources, the drone, the hidden camera, and his watch, had been synchronized into a single timeline. The total duration, 47 seconds. The agents called it a perfect storm of evidence. Every angle matched, every word aligned. The report would later describe it as one of the clearest civilian-recorded use-of-force incidents in federal history. For Holt, the same 47 seconds played in another room, on another screen, in front of internal affairs. They watched in silence. At second 23, Holt grabbed Marcus's wrist. At 27, Marcus fell. At 31, Holt deployed his taser. At 45, Jenna Brooks shouted, "Stop!" At 47, Holt froze. Then silence. One of the investigators whispered, "That's it?" The lead officer nodded. "That's it." 47 seconds, in that still frame. A man on the ground, a taser mid-air, rain reflecting blue and red light. Two lives diverged. One began his path toward justice, the other toward ruin. The world would later call it the 47-second storm. But in that moment, neither man heard thunder, only the faint click of a camera doing what humans so often fail to: remember everything exactly as it happened. By sunrise the following day, the evidence had already begun to multiply like sparks in dry grass. The 47-second encounter wasn't just a memory anymore. It was data, stored, synced, and copied in 4 separate systems before anyone could bury it. The morning news called it an administrative error turned viral storm, but inside the FBI's Atlanta field office, agents called it what it was: an unshakable record of abuse and conspiracy. Special Agent Mia Ortiz sat across from Marcus Langston in a gray interview room. Her tone measured. "You understand this footage can't be suppressed," she said. Marcus nodded. "That's the point." She tapped the tablet in front of her. 4 synchronized feeds played in unison. The Amazon drone's 4K angle showed the confrontation clearly. The Insta360 Go 3 hidden in Holt's uniform picked up the conversation with Parrish. The Apple Watch caught the voice inflection and ambient noise, and the iPhone footage from Judge Eleanor Grant captured the street view. Together, they told one truth from 4 perspectives, something almost impossible to deny. Mia looked up. "You realize what this means for Parrish?" Marcus replied quietly. "It means his empire ends today." The files in his locked briefcase, now soggy from rain, had already been authenticated. Swiss account ledgers, recorded wire transfers, and confidential memos tied Parrish to a multi-million-dollar laundering network using seized narcotics money. But now the recordings proved his active obstruction of a federal officer. A single phone call from Holt had cracked open a wall that took 10 years to build. At 10:32 a.m., the FBI cyber forensics team began compiling what they called the Langston package. All data, audio, and metadata extracted from the 47-second incident. Each frame was logged, every timestamp verified. A young technician leaned over to her supervisor. "Sir, the drone footage. It uploaded to Amazon's cloud before impact." The supervisor frowned. "Impact?" She nodded. The drone was hit by something. Maybe Holt's baton. But it already transmitted the full video 3 seconds earlier. The supervisor smiled faintly. Then we've got it sealed. Meanwhile, at Dunwoody PD, the mood turned desperate. Sergeant Victor Lang stormed into Parrish's office, slamming the door. They've got everything. Vince, audio, video, timestamps. It's airtight. Parrish didn't look up. He sat behind his mahogany desk, scrolling through a private chat thread on his phone. No file is airtight, he muttered. There's always a gap. Lang hesitated. Not this time. The feds are here. Parrish finally looked up, his eyes cold and gray. Then stall them. Ryan Holt sat 2 doors down, his badge already confiscated, staring at his hands. His palms still smelled faintly of metal and rain when the Internal Affairs officer entered. Holt looked up slowly. You don't get it, he said. He told me to stop him. Said the guy might be a suspect. The officer replied evenly. And when he showed you a DOJ badge? Holt's voice cracked. I thought it was fake. I thought... He stopped mid-sentence, realizing how hollow it sounded. I just thought I was doing my job. In another corner of the city, Judge Eleanor Grant uploaded her original video to a shared cloud drive requested by the FBI. The file was titled Dunwoody_stop_final.mov. Within hours, it reached 3.4 million views. Talk shows picked it up. News anchors debated it. Experts dissected every frame. 47 seconds of restraint versus rage. One commentator said, a masterclass in calm under chaos. Another added, by sunset. The incident was a national headline. At home, Marcus watched it all unfold with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. They're making it about race, his wife Layla said softly. It's bigger than race. Marcus answered, it's about power. And what happens when someone thinks a badge makes them God? He knew he'd be called a hero by some, a troublemaker by others, but he didn't care. For him, the goal had never been fame. It was exposure, sunlight on rot. That night, the FBI made its move. Parrish was taken into custody outside an upscale restaurant in Buckhead. He didn't resist. His only words were, you don't know who I work for. The agents smiled. They'd heard that line before, inside his home office. They found 2 hard drives labeled C-case funds and training bonuses. Each contained spreadsheets listing asset seizures, deposit transfers, and overseas remittances to shell corporations in Zurich and Belize. Every entry matched a case Parrish had supervised. The next morning, Agent Ortiz briefed Marcus in Washington via secure conference. We've confirmed 12 officers under investigation. Holt's your linchpin. His call ties them all to Parrish's laundering operation. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then it's over. Ortiz shook her head. No, it's just starting. Parrish's lawyer claims you provoked the stop to entrap him. Marcus leaned forward. I was taking out the trash. Ortiz nodded. That's what makes it believable. By noon, the evidence reached the Department of Justice Ethics Committee. They classified it under federal misconduct. Immediate action required. 4 divisions were tasked with follow-up. Internal affairs, cybercrimes, civil rights, and financial integrity. Each team received copies of the Langston package and across social media. The video continued spreading, analyzed, slowed down, captioned, debated. The internet didn't forget, and this time, it refused to look away. For Ryan Holt, that meant the end. His name was trending. His address leaked. Reporters camped outside his apartment. Protesters gathered with signs reading 47 seconds too long. He didn't leave his house for 2 days. When agents finally arrived to serve a federal summons, he didn't argue. You're here for the recording, aren't you? He asked. The lead agent replied. We already have it. We're here for the truth. At the same time, Marcus was called back to testify before a joint task force. The hearing was quiet but tense. Mr. Langston, a senator asked, did you realize your Apple Watch recording would become federal evidence? Marcus shook his head. No, sir. But I knew silence would protect the wrong side. The room fell silent. Those words would later appear in headlines, in congressional reports, even engraved on the first plaque of the Langston Justice Fund. Silence protects the wrong side. By the end of that week, Holt's suspension turned into termination. Parrish's accounts were frozen. 12 officers received subpoenas. 3 resigned before hearings began. The chief of police issued a public statement promising reform, but the community didn't buy it. Too many apologies, too few changes. People wanted accountability, not sympathy, as Marcus walked out of the federal building that Friday evening. The rain started again. A soft drizzle, almost identical to the morning of the stop. He looked up at the clouds, listening to the faint hum of a drone overhead. For a brief moment, he thought about how strange it was that justice, in the end, had come not from witnesses or words, but from machines that never blinked. Back at FBI headquarters, Ortiz uploaded the finalized case file. Its title was simple: Case 47S, Dunwoody Heights Incident. Under the Notes section, she typed, "Full confirmation achieved through redundant digital capture from 4 independent devices. Subject Ryan Holt corroborated via verbal admission and time-stamped metadata. All systems recorded truth without permission." She paused, then added one more line. "When humans forget, technology remembers." That night, as Marcus put his daughter to bed, she asked innocently, "Daddy, did the bad man say sorry?" He smiled gently. "Not yet." He said, "But one day he will. Or someone else will for him." She nodded, satisfied. Then she asked, "Is the rain going to stop?" Marcus looked out the window, where droplets danced under the streetlight. "Maybe," he said softly. "But sometimes it needs to fall before people learn to see clearly." Those 47 seconds had started in silence, just rain and misunderstanding. Now they had become a movement, a file sealed in federal archives, and a story no one could deny. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was proof that even the smallest camera, in the smallest town, could shake the tallest walls of power. Ryan Holt woke to silence, the kind that presses on a man's chest heavier than sound ever could. His phone was gone, confiscated. His badge, gone. His apartment was stripped bare except for a mattress on the floor and a half-empty bottle of bourbon rolling near the wall. For the first time in years, no one called him Officer Holt, just Ryan, a man without a title, without a uniform, without direction, outside. The news trucks idled, their cameras waiting for a glimpse of the man whose 47 seconds had gone viral across the country. Every channel had replayed the footage 1,000 times, dissecting his expression, his tone, his body language, uncontrolled aggression. One analyst said, "Unhealed trauma." Another countered, but none of it mattered. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. At the station, his nameplate was removed from the locker door. The chief's assistant didn't look at him as she handed over the termination notice. Effective immediately, it read, "Violation of departmental policy, excessive use of force, misconduct unbecoming of an officer." He stood there a moment, reading it twice, as if the words might rearrange into something merciful. But they didn't. His final paycheck was barely enough to cover rent, and by the time he reached the parking lot, the city's legal team had already prepared the paperwork for a $7.5 million civil lawsuit filed by Marcus Langston and the Department of Justice. That same afternoon, Holt's mother called from Missouri. "Ryan, honey, just tell them you're sorry. Maybe they'll understand." He sat on the edge of the bed, eyes unfocused. "It's too late for sorry. Mom." She started to cry softly, and he hung up before the guilt swallowed him. The first summons arrived 2 days later. United States v. Ryan Holt, civil action, No 42-19A, a federal case. No more internal discipline, no more quiet settlements. This one would be public. Every detail of his career, every complaint, every psychological report laid bare for the world to see. Within 3 days. The department issued a press release. The city of Dunwoody disavows the actions of Officer Holt and supports a full investigation. Translation. They'd cut him loose. When reporters knocked on his door, he didn't answer. When they shouted questions, "Do you regret it? Did Parrish order the stop?" He closed the blinds. He spent nights staring at the blank wall, replaying the same 47 seconds over and over, wishing he'd just kept driving that morning. But wishing changes nothing. On the 3rd week, Internal Affairs subpoenaed his financial records. A $12,000 deposit appeared in his account 2 days before the incident, transferred from a shell company connected to Vincent Parrish's laundering network. He claimed it was a loan. But the pattern was clear. Money for silence. Silence for complicity. His attorney, a tired man named Gregory Kane, told him bluntly, "They've got you on tape, they've got you on paper, and they've got you on camera. Plead out, or you'll never breathe free air again." Holt signed the plea deal in a courthouse hallway, surrounded by federal marshals. 18 months in federal custody, permanent loss of certification, forfeiture of benefits. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Holt paused. "I thought I was protecting my city," he whispered, "but I was just protecting my fear." The courtroom stayed silent. No applause, no outrage, just the echo of his own words bouncing off marble walls, while Holt faced sentencing. Marcus Langston was in Washington, testifying before a civil rights subcommittee. Cameras flashed as he stood behind the podium. 47 seconds can show you everything you need to know about power, he said. One man controlled by anger, another by restraint. But the law must serve truth, not temperament. The applause afterward was quiet but sincere. Even senators looked shaken. That testimony would later inspire the first draft of the Langston Rule. Meanwhile, Holt's life unraveled piece by piece. His apartment lease was canceled, his car repossessed. His ex-wife filed for full custody of their daughter, citing emotional instability and violent behavior. The court agreed. When the official order arrived, he stared at it until the ink blurred. The next morning, he pawned his remaining possessions, a watch, a service medal, an old Marine coin, and bought a bus ticket south. He spent the next 6 months drifting between shelters, picking up odd jobs, trying to stay invisible. But the past follows those who refuse to face it. One night in a small-town bar outside Macon, a patron recognized him. "You're that cop," the man said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Holt didn't answer. "The one who tackled that federal guy on TV? A bottle shattered, a fight started, and by the end of it, Holt was in a county cell again, bruised and silent, staring through the bars at a world that had no place left for him. 18 months later, he was released early for good behavior and sent to a rehabilitation center for veterans with PTSD. The doctors there saw more than anger. They saw shame, confusion, and a broken code of identity. For weeks, Holt didn't speak. Then one evening during group therapy, a counselor asked him, "When did you stop seeing people and start seeing threats?" Holt stared at the floor. "Afghanistan," he said softly. But it took America to finish the job. His attempted suicide came on the 14th month of his program. Pills and bourbon in a cheap motel. The staff found him in time. He lived. But something in him didn't. The once proud Marine and officer now worked nights as a security guard at a rundown trailer park in southern Georgia. His uniform had no badge, just a patch that read, "Security Staff." He didn't talk to the residents. He didn't talk to anyone. And by court order, he wasn't allowed within 50 miles of his daughter until she turned 18. Sometimes, during those long nights, He'd sit in the guard booth with a small radio tuned to the news. Once, he heard Marcus Langston's name. Something about a justice fund, a congressional hearing, a national reform bill. He turned the volume down but didn't change the station. Good for him. He muttered. He kept fighting. Then he looked at his own reflection in the window. Hollow eyes, gray at the temples. A man unrecognizable from the one who once thought he could control the world with a raised voice and a badge. The lawsuit's final judgment came 3 years after the incident. $7.5 million awarded to Langston and his family, plus an additional order for departmental reform and federal oversight of Dunwoody PD. The city called it blood money. The press called it closure. But for Holt, it was just another number. Another reminder of what 47 seconds had cost him. When the reporters finally stopped caring, when the cameras moved on to the next scandal, Holt remained, a ghost of a man who once believed in authority more than humanity. He sometimes wrote in a notebook, short sentences that didn't add up to much. I should have asked for help. I should have listened. 47 seconds, and a lifetime to pay. He never mailed the letter he wrote to Marcus. It sat folded in his drawer, unsent, unread. It said only 3 words. You were right. By the time Marcus read the news of Holt's final job, night security, trailer park, no family listed, he didn't feel triumph or anger, just the quiet ache of knowing that justice, though necessary, rarely feels like victory, and somewhere under the same Georgia rain. A broken man named Ryan Holt sat beneath a flickering streetlight, whispering to himself as if someone might still be listening. I used to serve the law, but the law served him better. The morning sunlight spread softly across the marble floors of the Department of Justice building, glinting off the seal that now bore a familiar name, Chief Marcus Langston, Civil Rights Division. It had been 2 years since the storm on Winding Creek Lane, but the echoes of those 47 seconds still followed him everywhere he went. The bruises had faded. The case was closed. The headlines quieted. Yet the country hadn't forgotten. They rarely do when a single act exposes a system built on silence. Marcus stood by the window of his new office, looking out toward the Capitol dome, coffee in hand, the weight of survival and consequence balanced between gratitude and purpose. You survived for a reason. His wife Layla had told him that morning, pressing a hand to his chest. Now do something with it. And that was exactly what he intended to do. The first months after his promotion had been chaos, a flood of interviews, televised hearings, lectures, and cautious praise from both sides of the aisle, but beneath the noise, Marcus was building something enduring. The Langston Justice Fund, born from his settlement money and congressional grants, had become a nationwide network providing legal aid and therapy for victims of police violence. Within a year, it had handled 87 cases and freed 12 wrongfully imprisoned individuals. Marcus refused to take credit. Justice isn't mine, he told his team. It's rented. We borrow it from those who came before us, and we pay interest by helping the next. Every speech he gave carried that same quiet conviction. When he took the stage at Harvard, his alma mater, the crowd rose before he spoke a word. When the prosecutor becomes the suspect, he began. You see how fragile power really is, but you also learn that truth, recorded, time-stamped, undeniable, is stronger than any badge. The clip of that line would later go viral, used in classrooms and training videos nationwide. He wasn't chasing fame, but it came anyway. TED invited him. PBS filmed a documentary, and Time magazine listed him among the 25 Americans who changed the law without writing it. In private moments, though, Marcus was still human, haunted, sometimes restless. The sound of a police siren could stop his breath for a moment, and every time he saw a rain-soaked street, the memory of Holt's voice echoed faintly. But he refused bitterness. Anger burns out too fast. He often said, purpose lasts. He poured that purpose into his writing, drafting his memoir, The 47-Second Storm. It wasn't a revenge story. It was an anatomy of consequence, part legal case, part personal reflection, when it hit bookstores. Critics called it a blueprint for moral accountability. It sold 1.2 million copies in 9 months, translated into 12 languages, and was assigned reading for new recruits at 3 police academies. Still, it was the personal victories that meant the most. His wife's medical foundation, Harbor Health, partnered with the Justice Fund to provide mental health services for first responders, including police officers struggling with PTSD. "We can't rebuild a system by destroying its people," she told him during a joint interview. "We heal them, or the cycle never ends." Marcus smiled at that. It reminded him why he loved her in the first place. Her compassion wasn't naive, it was strategic. Their daughter, Justice, now 7, had started asking questions about that morning. "Did he hurt you because you're black?" she'd asked one night. Marcus hesitated, then answered truthfully. "He hurt me because he was afraid, and he didn't know what to do with his fear." She thought for a while, then said, "So you helped him learn?" Marcus smiled faintly. "I tried. Sweetheart. I really did." 1 year into his tenure, Marcus received an invitation from the National Bar Association to deliver the keynote address in Atlanta. The auditorium was packed. Judges, attorneys, activists, even a few former officers who'd turned advocates, on stage. Marcus stood behind the podium, hands steady. "I used to think the law was made of words," he said. "Now I know it's made of people. Flawed, fearful, hopeful people. And if the people change, the law will follow." When he finished, the applause lasted a full minute. Outside, reporters caught a glimpse of him hugging Eleanor Grant, the retired judge whose video had changed everything. "You gave me my second chance," he whispered. She smiled. "No. Marcus, you gave this country its reminder." Behind the spotlight, Marcus worked quietly to reform internal federal procedures. He implemented the Body Cam Integrity Directive, requiring all federal task forces to store footage independently from local agencies, and established quarterly reviews of civil rights violations within U.S. jurisdictions. "Transparency isn't punishment," he told his staff. "It's prevention." Within a year, federal complaints dropped by 18%, and several states adopted the same model. The media called it the Langston Standard. Marcus brushed off the title. "Names don't matter," he said in one interview. "Results do." When Congress invited him to testify about funding reforms, he brought numbers, not rhetoric. He spoke about the $412 million paid in civil settlements for misconduct nationwide and the lack of mental health screening for officers with combat backgrounds. His tone was calm, factual, persuasive. Senator Elaine Carver leaned over her mic and said, "Chief Langston, you make it sound simple." Marcus smiled gently. "That's because it is. The hard part isn't understanding the problem. It's admitting we created it." Months later, he received a call from the White House. The president wanted him to serve as senior advisor for civil accountability. He turned it down at first. "I belong in the field, not the spotlight," he told Layla. But she saw the hesitation in his eyes. "You don't belong in either," she said softly. "You belong where you can make the most difference." 2 weeks later, he accepted. When The 47-Second Storm was adapted into a documentary, Marcus refused to reenact the scene on Winding Creek Lane. "Some moments aren't meant for performance," he told the director. "They're meant for reflection." Instead, he narrated from behind the camera, his voice steady, measured. The closing line of the film would stay with viewers for years. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers just loud enough to wake the nation. The night before the film's premiere, Marcus sat on his porch with Layla. sipping tea under the quiet hum of summer rain. "You think it's over?" she asked. "No," he said, "but maybe it's beginning in the right direction." She smiled. "And Holt?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "He paid his price. I just hope he finds peace before it's too late." They sat in silence for a while, the rhythm of rain soft against the roof, as if the sky itself was remembering. Later that year, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium at a Washington summit on justice reform. His closing message was simple, almost tender. "Those 47 seconds took a lot from me," he said, "but they gave me more than I ever expected. They gave me clarity, that the law, when wielded by conscience, can be the most humane weapon we possess. We can't undo what was done, but we can make sure no one forgets why it should never happen again." That night, he returned home to find his daughter asleep at her desk, a crayon drawing beside her, two stick figures holding hands under raindrops, one taller, one smaller, both smiling, at the bottom, in shaky letters. She had written, "My dad makes bad people good again." Marcus folded the paper carefully, slid it into the first page of his book, and turned off the light. For the first time in years, he slept soundly. Outside, the street was quiet. The rain had stopped, but the world was still listening. The year ended not with celebration, but with legislation. Across America, those 47 seconds had become a symbol, replayed in classrooms, debated in courtrooms, quoted in Congress when the federal reform package reached the floor. Reporters called it the Langston Rule, though Marcus never once asked for that name. It was simply the natural outcome of truth too visible to ignore. At the signing ceremony, he stood near the back, not beside the president, but among the crowd of citizens who had sent letters, petitions, and testimonies that made this day possible. The air was heavy with quiet emotion, the kind that comes not from victory, but from relief. Cameras clicked as the bill became law. Its first line read, "No authority may exist without accountability." Marcus thought about his father, about that night long ago when justice didn't come, and whispered under his breath, "We made it, Dad. We finally made it." The Langston Rule changed how policing worked in every state. Every rookie officer now faced 18 months of mandatory oversight and quarterly psychological evaluations. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. For both sides of the badge, training academies rewrote their curricula, focusing not just on tactics but temperament, not just on control but compassion. Alongside it came the Drone Accountability Act, requiring all commercial drones that capture violence to store their data for 30 days and cooperate with investigations. What had begun as a private recording now became a national safeguard. The parish penalty followed. Any officer who contacted a superior during a stop would automatically trigger an internal audit. And finally, the Holt Amendment, the most personal of all. If a department ignored 3 or more official warnings about an officer's behavior, the city would bear full liability for any resulting harm. It was law born from tragedy, written with precision, signed with tears. Across the country, departments began to change. Some resisted at first, calling it federal overreach, but within a year, the numbers spoke for themselves. Citizen complaints dropped, officer injuries declined, and community trust, long broken, began to rise again. Journalists called it the 47-second Reformation. To Marcus, it was simply accountability working as it should have all along. When asked by a reporter how he felt seeing his name tied to national law, he smiled faintly. "Names fade," he said, "but rules last. That's enough for me." He returned home to Dunwoody Heights on a spring afternoon, the same street where it had all begun. The rain had long since washed away the stains from that morning, but the memory lingered. He parked at the corner, walked slowly toward the spot where the confrontation had unfolded. The curb, the oak tree, the faint crack in the pavement where his briefcase had fallen. It was quiet now. Children rode bicycles down the lane. Neighbors waved. Peace had finally replaced spectacle. He stood there for a long moment, breathing in the calm, until a voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Mr. Langston?" It was a young officer, barely 23, crisp uniform, steady posture. "Sir, I'm new here. Just wanted to say, my instructors made us study your case. They told us what you did changed everything." Marcus smiled softly. "No," he said. "What we all did changed everything." The officer nodded, then hesitated. "Is it true you still keep the watch that recorded it?" Marcus lifted his wrist. The same Apple Watch gleamed faintly under the afternoon sun. "It reminds me that justice doesn't need noise," he said. "Just proof." They shook hands, and as the young man walked away, Marcus noticed something. The rookie paused by the same recycling bin he once stood beside, looked down, and quietly straightened it, as if restoring a small piece of order to the world. Weeks later, the Justice Fund opened a new regional center in Atlanta, built with part of the $7.5 million settlement that had started it all. The opening ceremony drew hundreds, activists, officers, victims' families, even members of Congress, on stage. Marcus kept his speech brief. "We don't gather to celebrate pain," he said. "We gather to ensure it never has to repeat itself." Behind him, a mural stretched across the wall, a simple depiction of a man standing in the rain beneath flashing blue and red lights, holding his ground, eyes calm. Beneath it, one line was painted in gold: 47 seconds to break a system, a lifetime to rebuild it. That night, Marcus returned home to find his wife reading on the porch, their children asleep. The cicadas hummed in the distance. Layla smiled. "You did it," she said softly. "No," Marcus replied, settling beside her. "We did what needed to be done." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels earned, not empty. He looked up at the sky, clear, calm. No drone lights, no sirens, just peace. Miles away, at a police academy in Kansas, a class of recruits began their ethics module. The instructor played a clip: 47 seconds of rain, voices, restraint, and rage. When the video ended, she asked, "What did you see?" One cadet answered, "A man abused by power," another said. "A man who didn't let power change him." The instructor nodded. "Remember that," she said, "because every decision you make will live longer than you do." And so the legacy of Marcus Langston continued. Not carved in marble, not sealed in law books, but carried in the hearts and habits of those who would one day wear the badge differently. The story of 47 seconds became more than a case. It became a compass, one that pointed a divided nation, however slowly, toward the difficult direction of justice. Thank you for watching and standing for justice. If this story moved you, share it. Let others remember that truth still matters. Subscribe, leave a like, and help keep the light of accountability alive.